Welcome to this video on the differences between servicing an LPG boiler like I have here and the natural gas one. So let's get on with it and have a look and see what these differences are. Now the first thing I like to do is check whether the cylinders or the gas storage tank has actually been installed correctly and is to regulations. So let's get on with it and find out exactly if this cylinder is installed correctly and how we're going to do this procedure for servicing an LPG combi boiler. So everything seems okay with this LPG tank. Now I've done a full video on LPG storage tanks and why all these bushes have had to be cut back. So if you haven't seen this video, I will put a link in the comment section down below. Now let's go and have a look at the boiler. Now to gain access to my boiler, I have built a cupboard on wheels. So you only have to undo 2 screws here, 2 screws on this side, and it just wheels out, and it literally takes less than 2 minutes to take it out. But if I was doing this for a customer, I wouldn't be putting it in this kind of cupboard, because if you need access quickly, it could be a problem. Now we can isolate the gas, electrics and water outside this cupboard, so that was one of the things I did make sure I did. So gaining access to boilers is important. So if your boiler is in a loft, it needs to have a fixed ladder, it needs to have a permanent light, and it needs to have a walkway all the way to the actual boiler. Now I've done a video on installing a boiler in a loft, and if you want to catch that video after you've watched this one, then I will leave a link in the description below. Anyway, before I touch the boiler, first thing I need to do is get out my little non-contact voltage detector or indicator, which is a 24 volt to 1000 volts, and see if it's safe for me to actually touch this boiler before I service it. So let's get on with that. Now you should know the drill by now. Turn on, make sure it's working, use it at a known supply, and then check anything metal around the boiler. Check the casing. Back to your known supply. So everything should be okay for me to touch now. Now let's check the fuse. Make sure we've got a 3 amp fuse. So that's good. Let's do a quick visual around the boiler. So there's a training manual. Flue, check it's sealed okay. Seems to be sealed okay. So flue seems to be in okay. Now there are no screws in an Ariston flue collar. They're just making sure you've gone full socket. We have a CO alarm, which is in date. Let's check the battery. Well, the battery works. Casing looks okay. Pipe work underneath. Pressures okay. Doesn't seem to be any leaks. Everything's insulated. So on the outside on the visuals, everything looks tickety-boo. Now one of the problems I have found is when you turn the hot tap on, the boiler makes a noise like that when it fires up. So another reason to make sure you get your boiler serviced every year, especially if it's making a noise. So let's check the flue outside. So because the flue is installed less than 2 meters off the floor, we've got a cage, which the terminal guard seems to be installed correctly. and it does look like it's sealed on the outside. If we go down here, we can check the gas pipe. So it's sleeved and not sealed on the outside like it should be. We've got the emergency shut-off notice. We have a test point and ECV. So we have the condensate pipe. It's got Condensate Pro on it, so it's insulated and it goes to a soakaway, which is good. And then finally the blow-off terminates correctly. So everything seems to be correct outside here. Question for you guys, would you dig up the soakaway and check the limestone chippings to see whether they need replacing or not? Put down in the comments if you think on a service that's what you should do if the customer has a soakaway. Now, on a service, do we have to do a tightness test? Well, regulation 26.9 of the Gas Safety Installation and Use Regulations says we don't need to do a tightness test when we're doing a service. But I will be doing a tightness test on this installation, but I won't be using it in this video. You'll have to look out for the LPG videos. Anyway, let's get on with this service. Another important test, which is always seems to get missed on services, is checking the water quality. So first taking a sample out of a radiator using your turbidity tube. And then using your test strips to see if there is actually any inhibitor in the water. Now what this is going to do is tell you whether the system needs flushing and cleaning or whether any faults that have occurred are because of dirty system water. So always make sure on a service or repair that you actually test what the water quality is and if there actually is any inhibitor in there. Now first task is to remove these two torque screws underneath here. Now the casing will just lift off and we can now do a visual inside of the boiler. Now if we look at the top, everything seems good there. Everything seems okay with the burner. Everything seems good down at the bottom, so there's no real signs of why the boiler is making this awful noise when it fires up. But looks like the trap does need cleaning out, so let's take the combustion chamber cover off and see what faults we can find, if any. Now to remove this, first thing I need to do is turn off the gas supply underneath. So that's off now. Now removing the electrodes, I need to pull the earth off, come out of this little clip here. I don't think that should have come off, but there you go. Should have come off that way. That goes back in there. Now this is connected to the board, so just clips off. Now this blue silencer, you have to twist it off, and inside here is a sponge which catches anything, and you can see that's clear. That's not where the noise is coming from, or doesn't look like the noise is coming from there, but we'll have a look inside there in a bit. Now there is a clip here which you can see, which we need to remove. So when I take off this, this will just move back a little bit and this will all come out. Then we've got the wires to disconnect off the fan. So that's out of the way now. So technically all I've got to do now is undo these 4 bolts using this 4 nuts, sorry, using this 10mm socket. So I like to take them off or undo them diagonally and also put them back on diagonally, but I think that's my commercial background, that. But it is the best way of undoing a flange so you don't twist it. Technically no service kit required for this, doing this for this boiler, as long as the seal isn't damaged. But lots of other boilers you will need a service kit. So first inspection, that looks okay, but seems to be a bit of crud in there. So let's give this a clean. Now in this bottle isn't anything to do with cleaning carpets. It's got a 50-50 mix of white vinegar and water, and I'm just going to spray it around the heat exchanger. Now I do have a cleaning tool for this, but I've left it at the centre. So what I've got here is a sponge with a very worn pad on there. Now you can't use anything abrasive, but I'm just going to give it a rub, gentle rub. And you can see all this loose stuff here. I'm going to vac that up. Let's get the vac. Now I do always carry this in my toolbox, which is designed for going in the middle of here. And you can see it's still a bit crusty in there. So that's going around with that little tool. I'm just going to give it another little bit of a vac around there, and then I'm going to get some clean water and flush it all out. Obviously before I pour the water in here, the trap is still connected and still going to drain. So hopefully now that's a lot cleaner. Well, it looks a lot cleaner. So let's inspect the actual burner. So the burner looks in good nick. Seal is also good nick, still proud. And insulation looks good, but the electrode needs a little bit of attention. Now, the only way you're ever going to clean one of these up is by using a file. You're not going to get it by using wire wool. And obviously you need it to spark on the end, not down here and across here. So always make sure you clean the electrode up. And this gap here should be about 4mm for this boiler. It is slightly different for others, but normally it's about the width of a pound coin. And obviously you've got to be careful here so you don't snap it. But if they had moved away and you do need to bend it back because you haven't got a spare, my advice would be heat this up first with your blow lamp So it's red hot and then bend it. Don't try and bend it when it's cold, because it will snap. So hopefully now that is clear enough and clean enough to ignite properly. You can see a little bit of rust on there, but I don't like touching these burners. I'm going to damage it. There's a bit of rusty roos there, but there you go. So hopefully that's going to be okay now, and we can put it back in and test it. Now, putting it back on is the reverse of taking it off, obviously, but this time what I do is make sure you lube the O-ring on the gas connection, and then you'll just feel it push in so it's at home, and then you get the clip. So the big part of the clip goes to the front and the little bit on the back. So that now should stop the gas connection pulling off. Then we can get our nuts and screw them on. Then tighten with the ratchet, but not too tight at first, because you don't want to twist the door. And then tighten it up. Now there could be a torque setting for these, so if you know what the torque setting is, you can use your torque device to torque it up. Well, that seems tight enough. We can now put our probe back and the cover with our ignition lead, and don't forget the earth wire. And put it back in the little clip, and then the wire for the fan. Now, one of the things I have learnt about this boiler, having so many at the centre, is when you put the fan wire back in, just make sure that that cable isn't touching the side, because if it does, it makes a vibrating noise. Anyway, now we can get the silencer back on. There you go, that's back into place. Now it's time to check the trap, so we can remove the flexible pipe off there. And then this is like a bayonet. Now I do have a bucket down at the bottom here to catch the water. So it's now, well, you can see the crud in there. So yeah, there's quite a bit of crud in the bottom of that. So let's give that a clean out. So let's remove this crud. There you go, nice and clean. Now we will need to fill some water back in here. And now we can put that into the boiler. Now the trap's back on, we can now turn the gas connection back on, and we can test it for leaks. Now, even though I've done a tightness test, I do like to check and make sure I haven't created any gas leaks by using my TPI gas sniffer. So everything seems to be pretty good around here. Now obviously there's only gas coming to the gas valve, but I can't test anything up here and everything we've done there until it's running, but there doesn't seem to be anything leaking inside there. So That seems to be tickety-boo. Now we can get this boiler back up and running again. So, fuse spur back on. This boiler is now ready to test. Now guys, is it the gas engineer's responsibility to check the batteries in the stat or change the batteries in the stat? Or is that just down to the customer? Put it in the comments down below guys, what you think. Now first thing I'm going to do is check the heating. So it's saying it's 18 degrees in here and we're only on 5, so let's go to 20 degrees. So we should get something happening at the boiler in a minute. There's a click from the stat. And there it goes. And it seems to be a little bit quieter than it was before. Now the boiler is up and running for the first time, what I like to do is run my finger around the combustion door to make sure it's not leaking any products of combustion. I'm also going to be doing a sweep test around here, but this is always my first go-to test, because if this was leaking there would be hot flue gases coming out of here and it would burn my little pinky. So that seems to be pretty good. Now behind this little yellow cap is the inlet test screw. So I've got my digital manometer connected. I'm just going to loosen this screw and then connect on. Now if you are struggling to get it on, you can remove the power to the gas valve and then you should be able to slide it on and then put your connector back in for your gas valve. So as you can see, we're connected at the inlet test point and we've got a standing pressure of 36.9 millibars at the test point of the gas valve. So we're just going to turn on the hot tap and see what it goes down to. So you can see we have a working pressure with the tap running of around 30 millibars. Now let's test the inlet pressure with the heating. So let's take it over 20 degrees. That should do it. And let's see what our working pressure is. And again it starts up, we've got 31.9. I've got my Sauerman Cycle 130 flue gas analyzer, and the first test I'm going to do is the sweep test around the heat exchanger so that I can put the cover on and then I can do all the tests then with the cover on, so my flue integrity and the actual flue gas analyzer. So let's get on with that then. I'm going to put the boiler in high fire to do this sweep test. So all I do is press and hold the reset button till service comes up. I'll test, and then I need to go and press the plus button till I've got the tap symbol on, and this will now go into maximum fire for me. There it goes. Then I can take my Sauerman analyzer and start the test. And I can now use my probe to go around the heat exchanger for 2 minutes and see if I actually get any CO coming out of this gasket. So 2 minutes are up and the reading's 0. So that's a good. Now next I'm going to check how much dirt and crud is in the magnet, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to isolate it on this valve here and then leave that one open and then isolate it under the boiler here, and then once I've drained the water out of the magnet, it'll also drain the water out the boiler, and then I can check the expansion vessel in the boiler, and then I can also check the pressure actually in this by isolating the water. So let's get on with that bit then. Now let's undo this drain underneath. I've got a bucket under here, so let's see what comes out. A hell of a lot of water by the looks of it. Anyway, let's wait till it stops draining. So it's nearly stopped. Anyway, what I want to do is I want to undo this so you can see what's in the magnet, if I can. There we go. So you draw the magnet out this way, but I want to show you what's actually on the magnet. So it has caught a little bit of crud in the year, even though it was flushed when it was first put in. Anyway, let's go and clean this, get it back in, and then I can do the tests on the expansion vessel and this little mini shock arrestor. Let's remove this magnet. Now we can wash the crud off. Now that's clean, we can get it back in. Now checking this expansion vessel on this boiler is a proper faff, because it's actually behind there, so you can just see the Schreider valve there. So basically what I'm going to do is get my hand in to take out that, and then my little pump I've got to try and find to get it in. Don't help, it's in a cupboard as well. So that's now screwed on there, so I can now check the pressure in the pump, and it's reading 0.9 of a bar, so that's good. All we've got to do now is test the water one and then fill it back up. So that's the water one tested as well, so all I've got to do now is top it back up. So I've topped it back up. Now this boiler has what's called a purge mode, so I can now put this boiler in purge because I've drained it basically to check the expansion vessel. So what it'll do now is it'll circulate the water around the heat exchanger and the plate to plate to get rid of all that air you can hear in there. Now I've got this boiler in test mode and I've actually got it in low setting, you can see that there. So I've got my Sauermann Psycho 130 analyzer all ready for going. Now this boiler has been running for about 10-15 minutes. I've taken the screw out already from the test point. So I can now put the probe in this left hand side and I can now see what the readings come out at on this analyzer. Now you can see the analyzer is set in propane. It's dead easy to do that. You just press on where it says propane and you can pick which gas you want. Then you can see we've got an O2 of 5.5. We have no CO whatsoever. We have a CO2 of 10.3 and we have no ratio. So that's looking good because the lowest this can go is 9.5 to 10.5. So let's put this into maximum. So the way we do that is press the plus button so we just get the tap symbol on its own. It'll now go into high fire. We can now take the readings once it's settled down. So let's check. Now we're on high fire. Let's see what we've got now. So we have an O2 of 5.5. We now have a CO of 118. We now have a CO2 of 10.31. And we have a ratio of 0.0011. So put down in the comments, guys, if you think that is tickety boo, or whether I should adjust the gas valve or not. I will change the probe over to the fluid integrity test point. We are still in minimum and we are reading an O2 of 20.6, no CO, a CO2 of 0.15 with zero ratio. So that's looking good. Let's put it back into high fire. Give it a few minutes and then let's see what our readings are then. So in high fire we have an O2 of 20.9, we have zero CO, and we have 0.07 on our CO2 with no ratio. So that's tickety boo also. Now the last analyzer setting is sweep test. So we've got to go around the casing of the boiler, around the turret, for 2 minutes and see if we get any readings on our CO, which we should have less than 10 parts per million of CO. So our 2 minutes are up on the sweep test and we've got zero CO. So I guess that's a pass also. So last test, safety devices. I've actually got the hot tap running. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the gas supply under here. And then this should go SP1, SP2, SP3, and then it should lock out. And there you go, 501, it's got no gas. All I need to do now is turn back on the gas supply, press the reset button, and away it goes. So that's my look at the differences when you're servicing an LPG boiler to a natural gas boiler. Now, is there any tests you think I've missed out or I should have done? Well, if you do think that, put it in the comments down below. Anyway, hopefully you've liked this video and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.